everybody, John here. Thanks for joining me for a new Allan Holdsworth lesson video. It's been a while since I've done one of these things because my interest has sort of been sidetracked with something else. And I've had this video pretty much ready to go for a couple of months with all the research that I did with it. I just kind of, I'll get to it whenever. But I'm ready now. So I wanted to talk about Allan Holdsworth's sort of compositional style and his chord style. And in doing so many transcriptions of his, I think I've transcribed pretty much everything he's written or recorded, I kind of got a good sense of sort of the techniques that you could often see in some of his compositions, as well as some of his chordal style. So I figured that would be really cool to go over today. And I've often been asked how Allan writes, and the thing is, there's really no easy way to do it. What I mean by that is more traditional music, traditional jazz standards, they use functional harmony, where the chords usually follow some sort of harmonic logic, where attention should be in a specific area because it's going to be released by the next chord, or all these different sort of ideas where how the chords should be put together, 2-5-1s and 1-4-5, 1-6-4, all that kind of stuff. With Allan's music, it's really not like that. It's very free. So there's really no way to write like him. So you can take these sort of concepts and these chords and sort of make your own like faux Allan tune, but it's not going to sound quite like him because you have to have his ear, and that's what's really tough. So this is not anything about how to write like Allan at all. These are just little compositional ideas and techniques that I've seen Allan employ in his tunes pretty often, with a bunch of examples, obviously, to support the stuff that I found. So to answer, I think the way that Allan writes is actually very simple. It's sort of like how he does his zone improvisations, where he's just playing chords. I think that's basically what he does to write. He'll play around with some chord shapes, and of course the top note of the chord is usually 99% of the time the melody, and Allan will start playing around with chords and developing some sort of melody or idea and concept. And once he has something, he'll often modulate it and move it around, and take parts of it and modulate that but leave others the same. And to him it's like a big magic puzzle. So often transcribing Allan's tunes is relatively easy, because once you get a few chords, you'll probably see them again, maybe just modulated, moved up a half step or up a fifth or whatever it may be. And would often spend a lot of time writing it in a way where those key changes or those modulations didn't sound very sudden. They sounded very natural, and you wouldn't realize that the melody has moved up a half step or something has changed until you actually sat and transcribed it. And he's mentioned that before. So it's like a combination of this sort of improvisational idea of playing with these chords and finding a melody, and then once having something solid, then sort of playing around with the overall structure of that sequence and modulating it up or down, or having different endings and endings that go to different areas. And I think that's a majority of what he's doing. So this video is really going to be centered around the chord styles, or the type of chords that Allan would use, and some of those techniques that Allan would use, either to modulate or just to write an entire section with. And I'll give you a bunch of examples with that. So first I want to talk about chords. So when I first started transcribing Allan's tunes, I was immediately drawn to the chordal aspect of it. Not so much the lead playing, because he wasn't a great improviser. He was a great improviser. But chords were something that I could understand. And as I started to do a few more tunes, I was able to find a lot of really interesting chord voicings that were harmonically very simple. And that got me really interested, like, oh, look at all these interesting ways of playing these chords that I never thought of before. And that's basically how I started my book, Secrets, which is all the as many chords I could find that Allan played in his tunes, and sort of categorizing them, because I was doing it for myself. I wanted to find more interesting ways of playing major sevens and minor sevens and stuff like that, and then it kind of started to spiral out of control. Then as I started to do more and more, I started to get a deeper sense of Allan's idea of harmony, as the chords to him, and he's mentioned this before, are just pretty much 4 notes from a scale. It doesn't matter what order they need to particularly be in. Now in functional music, yeah, that's important with the root on the bottom, but what I started to find really liberating in my own playing was basically just abandoning the concept of tertiary harmony or harmony music built in thirds. I was really just looking at the scale and trying to play 4, 5, or 6 notes in that scale in any sort of interesting way. And that idea was very free because it didn't necessarily have to follow a formula. If you knew where the notes were on the neck, and you knew what scale obviously you were playing, you can find a vast array of really interesting chords. And that was, like I said, really exciting for me. And the other thing is that the chords themselves did not have to necessarily be difficult to play physically. They can be really easy. It didn't matter as long as you were following that formula again of just playing the notes that were in that scale. The problem is in functional harmony, sometimes that is really important, but for Allan's music it's not. So you have to sort of pick and choose those kind of battles when you want to take that approach into something that's more straightforward. But in just a sense of if you're trying to rearrange a tune in a different way or playing something of Allan's, it was very exciting and liberating because you didn't have to follow these kind of rules. And the big lesson I got from this basically was just who cares? What I mean by that is like, who says that the root of the chord has to be the lowest note and the extensions have to be on the top? Why can't you swap them around? And basically with Allan's chords, he exploited all these kind of things. And again, you get to a point where the chords sometimes themselves are difficult to name because it's like it's like a 6th chord and a minor 7th. They're basically the same notes, just different inversions of each other. And describing them could be difficult because you might be thinking of it one way, but it sounds another way. And what's the correct name? Again, to Allan, it did not matter. It was just as that chord fit that scale, and to me that was really exciting. So in some of these examples, it could be a little difficult because you might hear the chord as one way, but you could be thinking of it as another. So just keep that in mind. Again, it's really not that important, and even thinking of the chord in different ways could give you different ways of actually using it because you're not going by how it sounds. You might be going by how you're thinking of the chord itself, whether because you put the extension on the bottom or something. Alright, now we're going to actually get into the chord playing. So the first thing to note is 90% of the time when Allan's playing a chord, it's a 4-note chord. And the reason why is because he's usually playing the chords with his fingers and he's plucking them all at the same time. And what he does is he takes the pick and he wraps his first finger around it. So his thumb, middle, 3rd, and 4th finger are the ones that are actually plucking the strings. So you really only have 4 notes to work with. If it's a 5-note or 6-note chord, Allan will sometimes double up a note with his thumb, or he'll start using the pick. And usually, for the most part, again, is like 95% of the time, every note is unique to what he's playing. And what I mean by that, it's very rare for Allan to play the same note twice in a chord. So, like, for example, a C major 7 that has the notes C, E, G, and B, he would just play those 4 notes. It would be very rare to, let's say, have Allan play a chord that has C, E, G, B, and then another E in it or something. You don't really see that often. So the first thing I'm going to categorize with Allan's chord playing is normal chords just voiced in a really interesting way. So I'll start off, now I don't like to use my pick, I like to just use my fingers when I'm playing these things. These are all going to be major 7th chords, so these are all interesting ways of playing just C major 7. So here's the first one. Here's another one. Now here, often when Allan plays these chords, he'll put them in 3rd inversion, which means that the 7th note of the major 7th chord is going to be in the bass. And again, you can think of that as a slash chord. Here's a C major with a B in the bass. Or it's a C major 7 in 3rd inversion. That's something that you'll find often in Allan's chord playing, especially for any of the normal 7th family chords, is that the 7th is in the bass. So major 7, another major 7. Here's another way you can play major 7 with the 7th in the bass, C major with the B in the bass. And this one too that Allan uses often. Here's a C major 7 with the G in the bass. For minor 7, same thing. This is just an E minor 7. It's the same shape that Allan did before, but now it's a minor 7 shape. Again, you can take the seventh of this the minor seventh and put it in the bass. Allan doesn't really do that. He doesn't play a lot of minor seven chords, but it'd be something like this. Here's an interesting way of playing a dominant seven. Here would be like a C dominant seventh chord. The shape is in House of Mirrors, but it's moved up a little bit. I'm just playing it in C. Or again, here's a third inversion, C major with the B flat in the bass. And like I said, it doesn't have to be for major 7, minor 7. It could be for any seventh family. So here's a third inversion, minor major 7 chord, E minor major 7. And same exact voicing all the way up here. Just the final chord in Where's One. All these chords, by the way, you can find in any Allan tune. I didn't just pick them randomly. All of these Allan has actually used. So the other type of chord that Allan likes to use a lot is any sort of triad with the extension, which is the 9, 11th, or the 13th, either in the bass or in the upper voice. So what I would mean by that, for example, let's say C major add 9. We have a C major here, and then I can put the 9 in the bass. Or I can take that same voicing, move it up here, C major, with the 9 in the bass. So here are some minor add 9 voicing. So like for example, here's a C minor with the 9 in the bass. Here's another one where you could do C minor up here, and then put the 9 in the bass. And something like this. Here's A minor with a B in the bass. Again, you can think of all these as slash chords, A minor slash B, or you can think of them as just minor add 9s with the 9th in the bass. Again, like I said to Allan, doesn't matter. Here's another one Allan likes to use a lot. Major chords with an added sharp 11, which gives it a Lydian sort of sound. Well, sort of sound, it is a Lydian sound. So here's C major, but now with an F sharp in the bottom and the bass. Again, here's C major, but with the F sharp on the top. So there's a major triad with the added sharp 11. And the same thing here, C major with an F sharp in the bass. Another common voicing that Allan does are minor chords or minor triads with the 11 in there somewhere. So with this is a minor add 11. You can think of this as a B minor add 11. And here's a E minor add 11. Because again we have E, G, and B, and then I have the 11 on the top. So House of Mirrors voicing. Now this is the part we're going to get into more gnarlier sounding chords. It's going to be an offshoot of what we just did with triads with the extensions, the 9, 11s, and 13s, either in the bass or in the upper voice. But now we're going to use avoid notes. And what an avoid note is, it's any note that's a half step above a chord tone. Now typically in just our normal major scale, the only avoid notes that we really see is if we have a major chord, the avoid note would be the 11th or the 4th note. And in a minor chord, it's the flat 6, because those notes are a half step above a chord tone. The 11 is a half step above the major third, so you're going to get tension there. And the same thing with the minor chord with the flat 6. You're going to have a half step above the 5th there. So Allan again will use these chords, just a regular major triad with an 11 in there somewhere. So here's one example. Here's C major with an 11. Now this one doesn't sound too bad because of how it's voiced, but I'll talk about how Allan sort of plays triads later, and I'll show you why this is the 11th here. But this is C major with an add 11. And again, C major with an add 11. This is from House of Mirrors, same idea. Now you can start to, you can hear that's the 4, and that's the 3rd, or the 11 I should say. So this is your major triad with the 11 in there. And here's a C major with an add 11. This one doesn't sound too bad. It's also the beginning of Where's One. Allan just does it in A flat. But again, it's just a major triad, and we're adding in the avoid note, the 11th. And again, like I said, you can put this note in the top or the top voice or in the bass. So here's an example of C major with an F on the bottom. Now again, this doesn't sound too bad because if your ear is hearing F as the root, it's like an F major 7 sus2. But again, this is where chords can be a little, how you hear it or how you're viewing it. If you think of it as C major with an F somewhere, sometimes it's easier to just sort of find those chords anywhere instead of saying F major 7, sus2. If I just say like C major and you put in the 11 in the bass or the F, it's easier to see. No pun intended. Here are some minor triads with the flat 6 in there. So for example, if I play E minor, and then I'm adding in the flat 13 or the flat 6, which is a C for E minor, you get that chord. This can also be seen as a major C major 7. But again, like I said, that's where it gets, it's like another chord synonym. But how is Allan thinking of it? I don't know. But it's just an example of playing a minor triad with the avoidone in there, which is the flat 13. You can also play it like this. Here's E minor, and the flat 13 on the top. Or another C major 7. In this example, we're going to do a minor add 9, also with the add flat 13. This one has a little bit more of a minor connotation to it because I'm going to take A minor, and then add the 9, which is B, and now I'm going to add the flat 13, which would be F. And I can do that with my middle finger on the 6th fret, on the B string. So now I have this sound. Or what I can do is I can move my 3rd finger up a half step, and then I can take my middle finger off, and that plays F and then E with my 1st finger. And Allan actually exploits this idea in 0274. Here's also a very common aspect of Allan's playing, are flat 9s. What a flat 9 is basically playing a note an octave higher and then a half step. So for example, I would play a C, and then an octave for C would be another C, and then playing the note a half step higher, which is D flat. That sound, it can sound really ugly, but Allan uses that quite often. So what you can do is you can take any chord that has a half step in it, or even a major 7 interval, and exploit that to have a flat 9 interval. So what I mean by that is this. If I take this regular E major 7, so I have E, G sharp, B, and then I have D sharp. I have E and D sharp, which is a major 7. What I could do is I can move the E down a half step, and I can move the E up, the D sharp up a half step to E, and now I have a flat 9 interval. And I keep the same 2 notes. This is the chord that Allan uses in his instructional video that he says it sounds much nicer than this. Another example is taking this minor 9 shape, E minor 9, and right here I have the G and then I have an F sharp. So that's again, I have another major 7th interval. And what I can do is I can move the G down to F sharp and the F sharp up to G, and now I have this. And again, if I want just to use another chord that we played before, so here's C major 7 that everyone knows. Again, we have our major 7th here. If I move the C down to B and the B up to C, I get the C major 7 in 3rd inversion. The B in the bass, or C major, but the B in the bass. So yeah, that's like an easy thing to do anytime you're seeing any chord that has like a half step in it. Whether it's just 2 notes, it's a major 7th apart or a half step apart, try to swap them in some sort of way so you can get a flat 9 interval out of it, and you'll have an Allan sounding chord immediately. Now we went over sort of the chord styles and the way that you can sort of see Allan playing some of these chords as major chords with an add 11th, or minor chords with an added flat 13, etc. You can play them either at close voice or wide voiced. Wide meaning the intervals are wider apart, and close voice means that the intervals are closer together. So like on a piano, you're basically just putting all the notes in a row. For guitar, that's extremely hard. So this is where you see a lot of the really difficult Allan chords coming from. They're the very close voice chords. So for example, here's G major with an added 11. Here's G, B, and then D, and then I have the 11 here, C. So this is just a regular G major add 11, but because I have the notes so close together, 1, 3, 4, 5, this is really hard to play. And of course, my middle finger, I can move up a half step to C sharp, and now I have a major with an add sharp 11. So of course Allan would do that stuff often. And here's another type of chord. Here's a minor with an add 9 that we did before, but again I'm going to play it in a very close voice way. So I'll play it in G. So here's a G minor with an add 9. Because now I've got the 5th on the bottom here. So I've got D, and now I have G, which is the 1, and then I have the 2, which is A, and then the flat 3, which is the B flat. And of course, White Line uses this voicing pretty frequently, and especially all the way down here. But harmonically, it's a very simple chord. It's a minor with an add 9, just voiced in a really difficult way. So obviously, the opposite of the closed voice chords are the more wide intervallic chords. So the last chord that I just played was a G minor add 9. Here's a way that you could play G minor add 9 like this. So because we have B flat, which is our 3rd, we have the 9 here, which is A, and then we have the root, which is G, and then we have the 5th on the top as D. Same chord, just now widely spaced. This chord is what you see in also Material Unreal. It's that last chord. So again, I can widely space them out. Or for something, let's say like Looking Glass, you can't really get more wider than this. And remember, this tune was originally written on a syntax tuned in fifths, or guitar tuned in fifths. So he wasn't really going for this voicing, he was playing it in a different way. But again, the notes are very wide apart. We have a root, we have a 5th, and then we have the 11, and then, or the 4, and then the 9 on top. So this is like a add 9 sus4. But a very wide spaced chord. And the other type of chordal thing that Allan would do stylistically was just play a very interesting interval stack in whatever key that you're in. So for example, something like this is the first chord in the Unmerry-Go-Round. I'm going to move it up a half step because it'll just be easier for me to talk about. So we've got root, 5th, 6th, and then the 4th here, sus4. So this could be like a 6 sus4 chord. But you can also see it as a major add 9, just voiced in a weird way, because we have G, D, E, and C. So C, E, G, and I'm adding in the 9 here. Again, so what's the name of the chord? Doesn't matter. But if you're thinking of it as 1, 5, 6, 4, you can then take that chord and move it up diatonically and find really interesting chord shapes that way. That's something that Allan would do. And just for fun, another example of that would be like the first chord in Water on the Brain. Something like this. I would call this a major add 9. We have an E and an F and an A. So to me, F, A with an E in there, we have a 1 major 3rd, and then we have a major 7th. So that's some sort of major 7th, and then I'm putting a G in the bass, which would be the 9. So again, you can take that chord shape and move it up and down. It's a simplistic chordal shape, really. And harmonically, you can name it something very simple, but you can then take this and move it up and down the neck and get really interesting chords. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about with some of the stylistic choices that Allan makes with his chords. Again, none of them can have to be really, super stretchy and difficult to play, but you can see them a lot of times as just simple major chords with an extension on the bass or in the upper voice, or just voiced in a really interesting way, or a major 7th chord with the 3rd in the bass, well, the in 3rd inversion with the 7th in the bass technically, and they don't have to be really too over the top and crazy to play. One other thing to do that I could suggest is when you are thinking of slash chords, if you really want like another Allan approach, is not to think of them as a slash chord where it's triad slash bass note. Think of it as like triad plus a note. So like for example, if I played this chord here, you would say this is E major with an F in the bass. So this would be, you could think of this as a E major with an add flat 9 in the bass, or F minor major 7 sharp 11. But what I can do is I can just say play an E major triad and add that F in anywhere. So if you know your cage system really well, you can start finding really interesting voicings right away. So like for example, here's E major, and then I could put the F right here. Or here's E major, and I could put the F in the bass here. The chords that Allan would play later. Here's E major with the F on the top. Let's see how much more I can go. Here's E major with the F in the bass. It's E major with the F in the bass. I could do this one here. Allan will play this chord. or of course you could put the F on the top, or I can do something like play this E major, and then I could put the F up here, I guess. Whoops. Can I put it anywhere else? Can I do something really stupid with it? I don't know. But the point is, you can really come up with something. Can I do, yeah, maybe something like this. You're just thinking of where all the ways that I can just play an E major triad and then adding in that note. And you can do that with any of the simpler chords. Like I said, you could do that with like C major 7, just thinking of C major and where's any place I can add a B. Or an E minor 7, where can I put an E minor and adding a D. And of course, you don't even have to do it that way. You can do it the opposite way for C major 7. Because remember, C major 7 is a C, E, and G, C major triad with a B. Or you could think of it as an E minor triad with a C. So you could do the same thing and just think of where can I play an E minor triad and adding in a C. And those choices to me are much more liberating and much more easier and freer to find on the guitar neck to come up with really cool and interesting chord voicings that you might not have normally thought of, like that. You know, I never would have thought of playing any of those F minor major 7 sharp 11 chords, because I'm thinking of E major and where can I find F, and oh, okay, I can do that. But if someone told me, you know, F major 7, F minor major 7 sharp 11, I couldn't do it that quickly. So that's just another thing that you can sort of put into your head and try to find these more interesting chord voicings. Alright, so that's going to be enough of me playing, and this part is going to be more about the compositional aspects and techniques that I've seen Allan use. So I originally was going to play all of this, but I would have to switch between the syntaxes. It would have been too much work. So let me talk about some of the different chordal and compositional techniques that I've seen Allan use to compose his tunes. Alright, so the first thing that I want to talk about with Allan's compositional playing, one of the techniques that I see often is what I call like a two-chord phrase that Allan just moves back and forth. Again, it doesn't have to be diatonic, it doesn't have to be perfectly modulated everywhere, but it's basically taking two chords and just playing them up and down. So like, for example, something like this. I forgot what piece, I think this is an eeny meeny. So I took this first chord sequence, and then I just played it again. You know, or something like a temporary fault that uses this major 7 and minor 7 flat 5 shape. Of course, that's not temporary fault, but I wanted to get the idea across. Now the next idea or motif that I see that's pretty common in Allan's compositions is playing chords with the same interval stack. Now that doesn't mean it's diatonically the same, it's just the same general idea where it's like a major or minor triad and there's the same extensions in the bass. Kind of harkens back to the chord that we did from the Merry-Go-Round. Like that's a great example, and I'm pretty sure I put it in here. But I could do something like something like this in the things you see. Here's a B major with the 9 in the bass, and then I move that up a whole step to C sharp major with the 9 in the bass, and then I move that up to D sharp major, but now with the flat 9 in the bass. The interval stack is pretty much the same, although the chords are different, so this is something that you'll also see often in Allan's compositions. The other type of thing that you see Allan use when he's writing is just using simple major and minor triads. Now Allan plays them two different ways, really. You have your standard normal major and minor way, like your D major shapes, you know, or even up here, these major shapes, and the minor shapes of your D minor shape. You'll see that pretty often. But Allan also uses another interesting way of playing these triads. Well, what he'll do is he sort of spreads out the intervals for them. So these are the only ones that I really see him do. So like for C major, you'd see this. So I'm playing C, E, and G. And then sometimes you can double up with the high E on the top. This is like the mental fatigue chord. And then since this is the third, you can also move this down a half step, and now you have a minor third. So now this is C minor. Or this. You'll see this as well. And then I can also play C major like this. Here's C, E, and G. And of course now I can put the 7th there, and that was a C major 7th. Showed you before, the C flat, dominant 7, now with the B flat there. Now if I want to play it in minor, I would move this E down here and bar with my middle finger. I've never seen Allan play this chord specifically. He might have, but he typically plays these three shapes: C major, C minor, and then this C major. So now what I was saying before is, if you play C major like this, now you can use your other finger, if I put my pinky here, and I can play the 11 here. So here's C major with the add 11, or the F. Or I can move it up a half step, and now I have C major with an added sharp 11. And then if I do the minor version, it's the same thing. Here's a C minor with an added sharp 11. Although I don't think I've ever seen Allan play this chord. And again, C minor with an add 11. So that's why I was saying this shape before when I was saying this as a B minor with an add 11. Because I think to Allan, he really sees this as a B minor triad. The other nice thing is that all of these triads can be moved down a group of strings. So here's B minor, and here's E minor. It's the same fingering, just moved down for all of these. But I've never seen Allan play any of those chords with one of the notes on the A string. Everything's always with the lowest note on the E string. So again, to reiterate, C major, C minor, and then C major here.
When I look at the edge, oh, it scares me. Though I know I always go
Now this is probably the easiest concept to understand of Allan's compositional playing. So he just plays the same chord shape up and down the neck. Remember, he's hearing the melody, and the chord is just like almost like a bonus on the bottom. So he's playing these chords up and down, following a melody that he hears, but he's just using the same shape. And the best example of that would probably be in Checking Out, where it's something like this is a minor 7 sharp 5 chord, or again you can think of it as a first inversion, add 9, A flat add 9, but I'm thinking of it as a minor 7 sharp 5. Again, he's just using those notes as a melody, and then he's guiding his ear to play that, and he's just moving the shape up and down. So yeah, you could just move one chord up and down the neck, as long as you have a good melody on the top that makes sense. And here are some examples of that. This is the last concept that Allan really uses, although he doesn't use it very often. It's the use of some sort of melodic pedal point, and what I mean by that is Allan will keep a melody note on the top and then move triads or chords on the bottom underneath it. So like for example, here's a section from Home where Allan will go. So for something like that, Allan is keeping this G note on the top, and he's playing an F major triad, and then an A major triad, and then a G major triad, and then here a G sharp major triad, all with that G on the top here. So that's really just a simple idea, and here's a few examples of Allan doing that. Now as a finale, I'm going to go over Lanyard Loop because I think this tune really shows off all the little things that we just talked about, Allan's compositional style, all kind of rolled up into one. And again, you'll see some of the chords that we talked about, some of the concepts, so I think everything fits in this package really nicely. So if you've seen my lesson video for Lanyard Loop, you'll probably be familiar with it. If not, I guess you'll go over it now. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can watch that video. I'm just going to talk about the concepts and some of the chord things we saw. Alright, so the first chord, it's a B flat sus4, or you can think of it as a sus2, like an E flat sus2. But it's really, I'm thinking of it as a sus4 chord shape. And what Allan does is he takes this same chord shape and then he's moving it in a major triad. So he's moving it in like B flat major, going from 5, 3, 1. And that moves down a whole step now to A flat, and that moves down to G flat. So that whole thing is just one chord shape. And now we have a little bit of that pedal point, I guess. So this note is C sharp is going to be played on the top, but what we're doing is we're moving this down half steps. So now we just pretty much have an A major here, and then Allan climbs up with these major add 9s with the 9 in the bass that we just talked about. So you can think of this as a B major with a C sharp in the bass or the 9 in the bass. And of course, this shape gets moved up now, just one chord. And now Allan goes and plays the same thing that we just played before with the sus4s, but now he's playing it in a D flat major. And then that ending's a little bit different. Then we take that sus4 shape, B sus, and then we move it down to A. And now again we do that pedal point thing where we're moving the A and the D part of it, and we're moving that down in half steps, but now we're going to do a little bit more. So, and now more again. All while keeping this E note on the top, that pedal point, this then we play this melody. Then again we play this A flat major triad, but now with the flat 13 on the top, and then that triad moves down too. So here we have like a G6 and then a G flat 7. So now we have this F major going to E major, and then we play the flat 9 on the top. Similar kind of shape that we just did before with the major shape here. And then that moves down a minor 3rd. And it's the same chord again. So I'm going to go over that really quickly again. sus4. So this is just one chord, then pedal point, moving the one chord up higher, transposed. same chord again. Then Allan repeats that whole thing again. Whoops. Here's where it's different. Instead of going that part, remember this is the E major triad with the 9 on the top, flat 9. Then Allan moves to this D minor, and then goes to D flat minor, and then adds this melody, which is really weird because we have D flat, and then we got the D, and then the E, and this kind of thing. That's the end of the first part. So it repeated the same way, but the ending was slightly different. Then we go on to the second section. Here it starts off with that 2-chord phrase. So again, we have that major with the 11 in the bass, and then we have this this major 7 sharp 5 shape, or again you can think of it as a G flat major with the flat 6 in the bass. So it's a 2-chord phrase again, because then Allan moves it up to C, and then it goes to F major 7 sharp 5, and then does the same thing here, but now it's transposed up from E to G. Then we have this little melody thing here, and then we have this B minor major 7 in first inversion. I'm sorry, in third inversion. And then that also goes to F sharp minor major 7 in third inversion. So we have the same chord again, same shape, same exact voicing, and so 2-chord phrase, same chord thing again. And now we start the beginning part again with those 4 chords, but now instead of playing them in B flat, we're now in B. Then here's where it sort of takes a turn. He starts playing those major chords with the 9 on the bass again. Ends here, and then now plays. So he's got a little pedal point thing again, where he's taking the same idea, but now moving these chords down, down a major third, and then adding in that note in there for tension. So that's it. You can see that that piece is a pretty good example of all the things that we just talked about with sort of the chordal concepts of playing, you know, the same chord and moving it up and down, or the 2-chord phrases, using the pedal point, all that kind of stuff mixed in with all the chord variations that we saw before, with putting the extension of the bass, minor major 7 chords in third inversion, all that kind of stuff. Simpler triads with like a weird extension somewhere. And like I said, the more Allan stuff that you learn and you transcribe, the more you'll see this. And it's just like a big puzzle, and that's why transcribing them gets a little bit easier, because you get a little bit and you can sort of draw on the things that you learned before. So I hope you learned something, you got a better understanding about Allan's sort of style, and I'll see you soon.